They laughed at his caveman dive until he shredded 9 fighters in one sky duel. The evening on Carthos 7 began with a drop in temperature that moved quickly across the canyon grid. Dust rose from the lower ridges, carried upward by shifting winds that signaled the start of unstable flying conditions. On 24 Ferrocycle 227, most pilots had already ended their routes early. Turbulence levels were rising, and the thermal readings along the southern corridors indicated a possibility of sudden downdrafts. But Damon Rourke was still in the air, guiding his Raptor 3 along a well-used escort line. His aircraft showed its age in every visible part. The hull was patched with uneven panels. Several repair seams ran across the fuselage from older impacts. One engine mount had developed a slight vibration that Damon knew by sound, but could no longer fix without replacing the entire assembly, something far beyond his income. The cockpit interior contained only the essential instruments. Many indicators had burned out over the years and remained disconnected. Damon flew with what he needed and ignored the rest. Below him drifted the cargo balloon he had been assigned to protect. It carried fuel cells destined for the mining stations at the far end of the canyon grid. Damon's contract required him to keep the balloon safe from raiders who often targeted slow-moving transports at dusk. The balloon had no defensive capability. It depended completely on the escort pilot to detect threats early, draw fire if necessary, and ensure the crew reached their destination. Damon maintained a strict formation pattern. His Raptor 3 stayed close to the balloon's right flank, far enough to maneuver, but close enough that raiders would have to engage him first. He checked wind readings, altitude shifts, and stress indicators with steady, methodical attention. He had spent years flying these canyons, and he recognized the behavior of the air the way ground workers recognize the behavior of machinery. Damon's background differed from most pilots working the escort routes. He had never attended a training academy or served in any organized defense force. He learned to fly in the southern storm belts, an area known for violent, unpredictable weather. His first aircraft had barely been functional, and surviving each flight required constant adjustments, fast reactions, and an ability to read the environment directly. Over time, this experience shaped his entire approach to flying. He relied on wind pressure, sound, and instinct as much as, often more than, his instruments. This upbringing also produced the maneuver other pilots mocked, the caveman dive. Damon perfected it because his early aircraft could not sustain long engine failures. When power cut out, he had only seconds to stabilize the fall by using canyon air currents. Through repetition and necessity, he learned exactly when to open the wings and how to angle the hull to catch the upward drafts near the rock faces. Most pilots considered the maneuver outdated and reckless. Damon considered it a practical solution to a common problem. As the escort run continued, the sun dropped lower, casting a dull orange light along the canyon walls. Shadows stretched across the flight path, creating intermittent blind zones for both scanners and visual tracking. Damon compensated by widening his observation pattern, glancing repeatedly toward the upper atmosphere where threats usually appeared. The cargo crew spoke occasionally through the comm channel, mostly to confirm altitude and route progress. Damon responded briefly and kept his attention forward. He knew why he was out here. He needed the pay to keep his aircraft operational. And despite the danger, this was the only kind of flying that suited him. The escort routes demanded constant awareness, physical precision, and an understanding of unstable skies. Damon felt more at ease here than in any structured environment. The risk did not bother him. The monotony of ground life did. A gust struck the Raptor 3 from the left, causing a short shudder through the hull. Damon adjusted his angle immediately, redirecting the aircraft into a more stable airflow channel. He checked the cargo balloon to ensure it remained unaffected. The crew inside responded with a brief acknowledgement, their voices carrying a nervous tone common among workers traveling unstable skies. The light above the ridges continued to fade. Damon noted how the upper cloud layer thickened, forming low, slow-moving sheets that reflected the last of the sun. This was a common tactic window for raiders. They used the glare and shifting shadows to mask their approach. Damon remained calm, but he increased his scan rate across the horizon. For several minutes, everything appeared routine. The balloon maintained its speed. The winds, although strong, followed predictable patterns. Damon kept the Raptor 3 steady and monitored the air around him with the quiet concentration of someone who had flown dangerous skies since childhood. Then, as the balloon turned along a shallow bend in the canyon grid, Damon felt a change in the air before he saw it. A faint fluctuation in pressure, a shift in the wind direction, a momentary crackle in the comm static. He looked upward. Something was approaching from above the cloud layer, multiple signatures descending rapidly. At that moment, Damon understood that the escort run was no longer routine. He did not know how many fighters were coming yet. He only knew that whatever was dropping through the clouds was moving fast, and it wasn't friendly. Damon kept his eyes fixed on the cloud layer as the pressure shift grew stronger. The comm static repeated in short bursts, not enough to distort communication, but enough to confirm interference from approaching engines. He adjusted his elevation slightly, giving himself a clearer visual angle above the balloon. The sky, once an even shade of fading orange, now showed faint streaks of blue light moving behind the clouds. These were engine trails, clean, narrow, and far too controlled to belong to any civilian craft. Within seconds, the first aircraft broke through the upper layer. It was a Skyblade, one of the modern fighter designs used by contracted mercenary groups across Carthos 7. Its armor reflected the remaining sunlight with a cold, metallic tint. 2 more appeared behind it, then several more until Damon counted 9 signatures in total. Their formation was precise and tight, descending with the confidence of pilots who assumed they already controlled the encounter. Damon monitored their positioning without speaking. His breathing stayed steady. His hands rested lightly on the controls, prepared for immediate adjustment. The cargo crew noticed the disturbance moments later. Their voices came through the comm channel with rising tension, asking Damon to confirm the identity and intent of the incoming aircraft. He did not answer right away. He needed confirmation of their formation behavior. The 9 Skyblades shifted into an expanding arc, a maneuver used to surround slow-moving targets while maintaining the ability to converge quickly. This was a raider formation. Damon had seen it before in other sectors. Skyblade mercenaries rarely engaged lone escorts unless they carried valuable cargo or wanted to make an example of a pilot. A voice cut through the comm channel, clear and sharp. It belonged to one of the mercenaries. "Well, look at this. The caveman is still in the air." Another voice followed. "I thought that wreck of his fell apart last cycle." A third pilot, more amused than hostile, added, "Show us the famous dive, Caveman. We want to see if the stories are real." Damon turned off the external audio, isolating the cabin from the open channel taunts. He focused entirely on the spacing between the Skyblades. They were confident, maybe overly so. They assumed the age of his Raptor 3 placed him at a disadvantage. The balloon was an easy target. The standard strategy for most escorts would be to retreat and transmit a distress signal. Damon knew this was not an option. The balloon had no speed and could not climb fast enough to escape. The cargo crew contacted him again. "Damon, break away now. They'll cut us apart if you stay alongside us. Take an alternate route. We'll try to ascend." Their voices carried fear more than strategy. Damon analyzed the surroundings. The canyon walls were too close for the balloon to climb safely. The winds above the next ridge were unstable. If the balloon attempted to ascend now, it would drift directly into the mercenaries' firing path. Damon replied with only a few words, keeping his tone calm. "Maintain current course." Inside the Raptor 3, Damon began shutting down non-essential systems. He dimmed internal lights, redirected limited power into the manual control surfaces, and loosened his right-hand grip to reduce tension on the throttle. He checked the structural integrity sensors. They flickered, but were readable enough to judge the aircraft's limits. The mercenaries continued their slow descent, tightening the arc around him and the cargo balloon. Their engines produced a faint, high-frequency whine that resonated through the canyon. Damon kept the Raptor 3 aligned with the balloon, showing no sign of evasive action. The mercenary formation shifted more aggressively in response. They interpreted his calm posture as fear or resignation. The Skyblades closed the distance. Their wings adjusted into engagement configuration. Damon recognized the exact moment they prepared to fire, even before any weapon systems activated. Their formation changed priority from intimidation to execution. The lead Skyblade accelerated slightly, positioning itself to force Damon downward or away from the balloon. Damon did not move. He monitored the air currents flowing along the canyon wall beneath him. The temperature dip created a developing downdraft. The pressure readings indicated a strong vertical pull forming beneath the Raptor 3. Damon's eyes tracked the shape of the canyon floor, the angles of the side ridges, and the developing wind channel that ran along the left wall. It was the same airflow pattern he had learned to navigate in the storm belts. He tightened his restraints. He checked the altimeter once. He placed his left hand on the engine cutoff lever. The cargo crew cried out over comms, urging him to flee. The Skyblades locked their positions, expecting an easy elimination. Damon cut the engines. The Raptor 3 dropped instantly. Every alarm inside the cockpit activated at once, but Damon ignored them. He shifted his attention entirely to the developing airflow as the aircraft transitioned into the early stage of freefall. His descent angle sharpened. The canyon wind struck the hull with uneven force. The Raptor 3 rotated slightly as it fell, responding to gravity, friction, and turbulence exactly the way Damon expected. Above him, the mercenaries reacted with open laughter. None of them saw danger in the maneuver. Their targeting systems tracked the Raptor 3's path clearly. They assumed Damon had lost control or accepted defeat. The 9 fighters folded into dive configuration and began to follow him downward, still maintaining wide spacing, still mocking him over the open channel, still unaware that the descent had already shifted into Damon's advantage. The freefall had begun. The Raptor 3 entered a full vertical drop the moment Damon cut the engines. The cockpit vibration intensified as wind pressure built against the unpowered hull. Damon leaned slightly forward in his seat, not out of fear, but to feel the movement of the aircraft more precisely. The gauges flickered as the descent accelerated. The outdated instruments were never designed to remain stable at this speed, yet Damon had flown through worse conditions in his early years. The nose pointed directly toward the canyon floor. The terrain below expanded rapidly in his field of view, revealing layers of rock and dust compressed by centuries of wind erosion. Damon scanned the environmental indicators without panic. Altitude dropped in sharp increments. Air pressure climbed. The hull temperature rose as friction increased along the outer plating. Above him, the 9 Skyblade fighters followed. Their engines produced bright, concentrated trails as they shifted into pursuit mode. The pilots did not attempt to fire. They believed the descent itself would destroy the Raptor 3 before any engagement became necessary. Damon heard fragments of their voices through the comm static, short bursts of laughter, remarks about his aircraft, and comments on how predictable the situation seemed. Damon paid no attention. His focus narrowed to the behavior of the air around him. He watched small shifts in dust patterns rising from the canyon floor. He tracked the minor lateral drift that pulled the Raptor 3 a few centimeters to the left. He noted how the descent angle aligned with a developing wind channel that ran between 2 vertical rock faces. The canyon walls created a pocket of compressed air that moved upward with significant force. Damon had used this same pattern during past emergency recoveries. He kept his hands loose on the controls. Any premature adjustment would disrupt the alignment. The freefall stage required complete trust in gravity and airflow. The Raptor 3 rotated slightly, a controlled yaw caused by uneven plating on the right wing. Damon compensated by minor pressure on the rudder pedal, restoring balance without altering the descent profile. Warning alarms continued to sound. The altitude meter dropped below critical levels. Damon calculated the remaining time before ground impact. It was not measured in minutes, but in seconds. The cargo crew's voices shouted his name over the channel, but he silenced the incoming audio with a quick adjustment. He needed no external sound interfering with his concentration. The canyon floor approached fast. The rock formations now filled the entire lower half of his canopy. Damon slowed his breathing. He felt the air pressure increase as the aircraft moved into the final stretch of the drop. The wind began to push upward, signaling the start of the upward draft he depended on. He waited. A mercenary pilot's voice cut through again. "Caveman, you won't pull out of this. End it now before you hit the ridge." Another pilot added, "This is suicide. That old trick won't save you." Damon did not respond. He focused entirely on the final element of the maneuver, timing. The upward draft had to reach full force before he could rotate the wings. Too early, and he would stall. Too late, and he would not clear the canyon floor. He listened to the hull vibration, the shift in wind density, the rise in structural tension along the wing mounts. Then he felt the change. The upward draft struck the underside of the Raptor 3. It wasn't sudden, but Damon recognized the exact moment the aircraft crossed into the wind layer. The vibration changed pitch. The descent angle stabilized. The airflow pressure increased. This was the window. Damon moved. He deployed the wings in a rapid, precise motion. The Raptor 3 jolted violently as the air caught the surfaces. The entire aircraft shook from the stress of the sudden aerodynamic shift. Damon tightened his grip and angled the left wing into the stronger portion of the draft. Gravity and wind collided with equal force. The Raptor 3 swung sideways, then upward, climbing in a steep curve along the canyon wall. The sudden shift disrupted the mercenary formation completely. Their AI systems predicted a terminal impact, not a vertical reversal. The lead fighters overshot the recovery zone. Two attempted to adjust their dive angles, but misjudged the distance. Their engines clipped unsteady air pockets near the canyon surface, causing their stabilizers to fail. They began to spiral. Damon continued to rise. His maneuver placed him at a lateral angle below the remaining fighters, giving him an advantageous position. The canyon's airflow assisted his climb, allowing him to gain height rapidly despite the limited capability of the Raptor 3's aging structure. The mercenaries reacted with sudden urgency. Their voices flooded the open channel. "He flipped the dive, how?" "AI lost the track. Reacquire target. Break formation. Break formation." But they were too late. Their pursuit path had been based entirely on the assumption that Damon would be unable to recover. None of them expected a manual dive reversal executed with this level of precision. Their formation dissolved into disorganized movements as each pilot tried to avoid collision with the others. Two fighters clipped wingtips when attempting simultaneous adjustments. A third pilot pulled up too sharply and stalled his engine. Another miscalculated the canyon airflow entirely and lost control as his stabilizers tried to compensate. Damon reached a stable altitude above the chaos. His breathing remained steady, though the Raptor 3 rattled violently from the stress it had endured. He angled the aircraft into a wide arc, positioning himself for the next stage of the engagement. The sky below was filled with disoriented fighters, each struggling to recover from a maneuver their systems had not been designed to counter. The Caveman dive had shifted from a mocked relic to a tactical advantage within seconds. Damon prepared to re-enter the fight. Damon leveled the Raptor 3 as he cleared the canyon wall, the aircraft shaking from the strain of the dive reversal. The structural integrity indicators flickered red across the control panel, but the wings held. He adjusted his throttle slightly, enough to maintain altitude without overloading the left engine. The air around him was turbulent, carrying dust from the canyon floor, where several debris trails marked the early failures of the mercenary pursuit. Below, the formation was broken. The skyblades that had dived after him were now separated and disorganized, each attempting to regain stable flight. Their engines glowed in uneven patterns as their pilots tried to override their AI systems, forcing manual control to counter the unplanned maneuvers. Damon watched their movements carefully. Their angles, their turn radii, and their recovery attempts all revealed their immediate priorities: regain orientation, re-establish tracking, and contain the situation before losing complete tactical advantage. Damon did not wait for them to reorganize. He pulled the Raptor 3 into a descending arc along the canyon wall, positioning himself behind the fighter closest to his altitude. That pilot had just stabilized his craft, unaware that the Raptor 3 was already closing in. Damon fired a short burst from his forward cannons. The round struck the Skyblade's rear stabilizers. The aircraft pitched forward, lost lift, and dropped out of view. Damon did not follow the fall. He shifted immediately toward the next target. The second fighter attempted evasive action, pulling into a high-angle climb. Damon recognized the move. Skyblade pilots relied on their engine's superior thrust to escape older aircraft by creating vertical separation. But the canyon winds disrupted the clean airflow the Skyblade needed for that maneuver. Damon angled his Raptor 3 upward before the fighter reached escape altitude. He anticipated the moment the wind turbulence would hit. When it did, the Skyblade's climb wavered. Damon fired another controlled burst. The rounds penetrated its side plating. The aircraft rotated uncontrollably and disappeared into the canyon currents. The mercenaries' comm channel erupted with overlapping warnings and attempts at coordination. Damon reactivated external audio long enough to hear them. Reset formation. Spread out. Don't track him so low. He's below the model. AI can't predict his turns. Regain altitude. Avoid the canyon layer. The fighters executed their new plan, attempting to climb out of the turbulent zone. Damon understood that once they reached higher air, their technological advantages would return. The Raptor 3 could not match their acceleration or their sensor range in open sky. He could not let them regroup. Damon pushed the Raptor 3 into a steep climb, even though the aircraft's engines protested with sharp mechanical vibrations. He maneuvered into the path of 2 Skyblades rising side by side. Their pilots focused on gaining altitude and did not notice the Raptor 3's approach until Damon fired. Both aircraft attempted sudden evasive turns. Their wings clipped each other, sending them into uncontrolled spins. Damon angled away before the resulting collision shockwave reached him. For fighters remained. The canyon echoed with the sound of engines adjusting and overcompensating. Damon used the terrain to his advantage. He dropped into a lower air channel, allowing the canyon walls to hide him from immediate view. He watched the remaining fighters through narrow openings between the ridgelines. They were searching for him, making broad sweeps across the canyon grid. Their formation was wider now, too wide for coordinated fire, but necessary to cover more angles. One fighter drifted too close to the rock face while scanning. Damon rose from below, using the upward wind to propel the Raptor 3 into firing position. His burst hit the underside of the Skyblade. The pilot attempted to recover, but lost control as one wing detached. The aircraft struck the canyon wall and fragmented on impact. 3 left. The surviving pilots changed tactics again. They abandoned altitude advantages and instead engaged in aggressive close-range hunting patterns, diving and sweeping through the canyon in unpredictable arcs. This was the kind of flying their AI systems were designed to support: rapid adjustments, high-speed tracking, and automatic threat prioritization. Damon felt the pressure increase. Their engines cut through the air with precision. Their weapons activated, emitting controlled pulses that struck the canyon floor and walls, marking the path of their attempted containment. Damon responded by re-entering the canyon depth, where the winds were more unstable. He knew this environment. The Skyblades did not. Their AI compensated only up to certain thresholds, and the canyon exceeded them regularly. Damon angled himself between 2 converging ridges, letting the wind push him sideways into a shadowed channel. A fighter pursued him. Its pilot relied on predictive tracking instead of instinct. Damon cut his thrusters briefly, altering his speed profile. The fighter overshot him. Damon fired at its rear vent. The explosion shook the nearby air, scattering debris in a narrow arc. Two remained. Damon ascended again, using a rotating updraft that spiraled between the canyon spires. The remaining fighters saw the movement and converged. Their coordinated attack pattern returned. They fired in timed pulses, attempting to force Damon into a predictable dodge. He recognized the trap immediately. If he dodged too early, they would box him in. If he dodged too late, he would take a direct hit. He did neither. He dropped again, this time only a short fall, just enough to break the targeting lock and reposition beneath them. The fighters crossed paths overhead, adjusting sharply to reacquire him. Their turns intersected at a narrow angle. One pilot misjudged the distance. His wing clipped the other fighter's intake housing. Both aircraft veered out of control. One spiraled downward. The other tried to stabilize but caught a turbulent pocket and crashed against the canyon face. The sound of engines faded. Dust lifted from the canyon floor in slow, spreading waves. Damon leveled his Raptor, 3 once more. His breathing was steady. The aircraft's frame vibrated from stress, but the wings stayed intact. He checked his surroundings. There were no hostile signals left. The sky had become quiet again. Damon adjusted his throttle and climbed back toward the cargo balloon. He still had a job to finish. Damon guided the Raptor, 3 upward through the dust-filled air, the engines producing an uneven tone caused by the strain of the dive, the excessive torque, and the rapid altitude changes. The structural stress indicators on the console remained in the red zone, but the readings were stable enough for controlled flight. He adjusted the throttle slowly, avoiding any sudden increase that might force the left engine to seize. The aircraft creaked with every minor correction. Metal panels vibrated against weakened mounts. Damon monitored each noise the way a mechanic listens to a machine he has rebuilt many times. As he ascended, the canyon widened, allowing him to regain formation with the cargo balloon. The large craft drifted steadily, maintaining its original course as if unaware of the battle that had unfolded only moments earlier. Damon positioned the Raptor, 3 beside it, matching its speed. The balloon's crew opened a channel immediately. Their voices were uneven, still trying to process what they had witnessed. They asked him if he was injured. They asked how many fighters remained. They asked how the Raptor 3 was still able to fly. They spoke rapidly, overlapping one another without waiting for responses. Damon listened for a moment and then replied with a single, steady report. The escort route was clear, and he would remain in position until they reached the next transfer hub. The crew fell silent for several seconds before acknowledging. Their tone shifted from panic to disbelief. Damon ended the transmission and returned his focus to the flight path. The sky ahead was calm again. The remaining daylight reflected off the canyon rim, providing a clear route toward the northern ridge. Damon checked the environmental sensors. Wind levels were within acceptable ranges now. The turbulence that had complicated earlier maneuvers was diminishing. Inside the cockpit, the heat from the engines radiated through the panels. Damon loosened his flight harness, allowing more room to breathe. He inspected the control surfaces through the external cameras. The right wing showed visible deformation near the stabilizer mount. The underside plating carried new scoring marks from debris. Minor smoke residue clung to the aft section. These were manageable issues, though they would require several hours of repair work later. Damon had performed similar repairs countless times. Most escort pilots left their aircraft in maintenance hangars overnight. Damon worked on his alone, using tools he purchased secondhand and replacement parts he salvaged from retired airframes. He trusted his own repairs more than any shop's. He had learned to maintain his aircraft the same way he learned to fly it, through necessity. The cargo balloon continued along its route, drifting over the ridge line with a slight sway caused by remaining crosswinds. Damon stayed close. His attention never left the surrounding airspace. Even after eliminating the mercenary fighters, he treated the escort run with the same discipline as before. A single threat was enough to compromise the mission. He resumed scanning the horizon, checking for movement patterns, engine noise, or sudden pressure changes. His breathing remained steady throughout the flight. The intensity of the earlier combat did not alter his routine. Damon managed the aftermath the same way he managed the danger, quietly, methodically, and without visible reaction. To him, the engagement had not been a display of skill or defiance. It had been a necessary response to protect the cargo. Once the threat was gone, the priority returned to completing the job. Minutes passed. The sky dimmed into deeper shades of orange and red, signaling the final stage of dusk. The balloon crew transmitted a short message of gratitude, though their voices carried hesitation, as if they were unsure how to express appreciation under circumstances they barely understood. Damon told them their route would remain clear. He did not elaborate. He did not mention the damage to his aircraft or the risk he had taken. His focus remained on the task. As the convoy approached the transfer hub's perimeter beacons, Damon scanned the area one final time. All readings were normal. The air was calm. The route was secure. He reduced speed and took his designated holding position as the balloon descended into the docking zone. Only then did Damon allow himself a moment to rest. He powered down the weapons systems, calibrated the throttle to idle, and let the Raptor 3 drift gently above the platform. The aircraft rattled from internal strain but held steady. For other pilots, destroying 9 fighters in a single engagement would have been an extraordinary event, something to recount in detail and emphasize with pride. For Damon Rourke, it became another completed escort mission, an operation performed within the limits of necessity, using skills formed long before anyone knew his name. He did not wait for recognition. He did not expect questions or praise. He simply prepared to turn the Raptor 3 back toward the maintenance sector to begin repairs, because the next escort run would come soon, and his aircraft needed to be ready. To Damon, survival was not a triumph. It was part of the schedule. Damon taxied the Raptor 3 into the maintenance sector as the last light of dusk disappeared behind the ridge. The hub's landing crews watched the damaged aircraft approach with visible confusion. They had received no alerts of an engagement, and the balloon crew's emergency transmission arrived only after the docking sequence had already begun. When the Raptor 3 settled onto the platform, several workers approached it cautiously, expecting to find a wounded pilot or an aircraft in critical condition. Damon opened the canopy and climbed out without urgency. His expression remained unchanged, and his movements were steady despite the long engagement and the strain on the aircraft. The crews attempted to question him immediately, asking about the damage and the reports of destroyed skyblades. Damon gave minimal details. He stated only that raiders had engaged the convoy and that the threat had been neutralized. He requested access to the hangar bay to begin repairs. The workers exchanged looks, unsure how to respond. Damon's calm tone did not match the scale of the event they had heard through fragmented radio chatter. Word had already begun to spread across the hub. Technicians repeated the same story. 9 fighters had been seen on scanners, and none had returned. Others claimed they saw debris falling into the canyon. A few insisted Damon had performed a prohibited maneuver during the encounter. Within an hour, more people arrived at the hangar. Some came out of curiosity, others out of disbelief. They gathered near the Raptor 3's designated bay, speaking in low tones as Damon removed damage panels from the wing assembly. He examined each component with practiced focus, identifying stress fractures and deciding which parts could be repaired and which needed replacement. He worked with the same slow, methodical precision he applied to flying. A young mechanic approached him and asked directly whether the stories circulating around the hub were accurate. Damon did not pause his repairs. He confirmed that 9 fighters had pursued him. He confirmed that the escort completed its route. He did not elaborate further. The mechanic waited, expecting a recounting of events, but Damon had already returned to tightening a mounting bracket. The conversation ended. As the hours passed, the hangar staff observed Damon with increasing respect and uncertainty. He did not behave like someone who had survived an overwhelming engagement. He did not replay the moment, offer explanations, or display any emotional reaction. He continued working as though the outcome had been inevitable, as if this were simply another routine escort mission with standard post-flight maintenance. By the next cycle, the story had traveled beyond the hub. Cargo crews at other stations discussed it during loading shifts. Pilots in nearby sectors repeated the details they had heard, adding their own speculation. Some doubted the accuracy of the report, arguing that an outdated aircraft could not have outmaneuvered modern fighters. Others insisted that Damon's maneuver, once considered reckless, was now the subject of serious discussion among experienced flyers who understood the physics involved. The term caveman dive, originally used as an insult, began to take on a different meaning. Pilots spoke of it as a maneuver requiring extreme control rather than desperation. Mechanics analyzed its feasibility. Instructors at certain training outposts reviewed archive footage to determine whether such a recovery was replicable. No consensus formed, but the tone of the discussions had changed. The mockery faded. The skepticism remained, but it now carried a measure of respect. Throughout these developments, Damon remained detached from the surrounding reactions. He completed his repairs, replaced the damaged stabilizer mount, resealed the hull plating, and recalibrated the engine output. He ran diagnostic cycles until the Raptor 3 met his acceptable operational standards. When questioned again by station staff or passing pilots, he provided the same short, factual explanations. He did not retell the encounter. He did not correct exaggerated versions of it. He simply prepared for the next scheduled escort route. Damon filed his readiness report at the operations desk. The coordinator asked whether he intended to continue flying immediately, given the intensity of the previous mission. Damon confirmed that he did. There was no hesitation in his voice. The coordinator reviewed the new assignments and issued him another escort route, an early cycle run to the eastern mining sectors. Damon accepted without commentary. As Damon left the operations center, several workers paused and watched him, not out of admiration, but out of realization. They recognized that the man they once called Caveman did not operate by their standards of risk or recognition. He functioned according to a set of skills he had developed in environments harsher than the regulated skies of the escort routes. His stability in crisis was not a performance. It was the result of years of flying conditions most pilots avoided altogether. Outside, the early cycle sky remained dim, with low clouds gathering over the canyon grid. Damon walked toward the hangar where the Raptor 3 waited. The aircraft showed fresh repairs, its mismatched panels secured in place, its engines primed for another day of service. Damon checked the fuel line, inspected the wings, and reviewed the route map one more time. He climbed into the cockpit, tightened the restraints, and powered up the systems. The engine started with a rough tone before settling into a steady hum. Damon guided the Raptor 3 toward the launch platform. When the station controllers cleared him for departure, he lifted off without ceremony, following the same pattern he had followed countless times before. There was no audience, no recognition, no formal acknowledgement of what had occurred the previous cycle. Damon did not require any. For him, survival was not an achievement, and reputation was not a priority. He had a task to complete. And to Damon Rourke, the sky, unstable, dangerous, unpredictable, remained the only place where his skills had purpose.